דרום-מזרחית זה נכון. זה 100 של מטרה מהכיוון
אלפא תחליטי למעלה.
4 שיגר על המטרה המזרחית ביותר.
טיל הראשון. 1-2 לוקח באזור 9.
2 תהיה מתחתיך, ותנצח 2 מתחתיך ב-2, 3, 1 אני ממליץ תתקיים היום.
So far, I think this is quite an unprecedented success from an Israeli point of view. I wouldn't call it a win, and I wouldn't call it the end of this chapter of relations between Iran and Israel. I would say that this is the opening act whereby Iran, for the first time, stepped out of the convenience of the shadows and the protection of the shadows and decided to take on Israel directly. And by doing so, of course, Iran presents itself as a target as well. I think I was surprised by the effectiveness and the tremendous success of Israeli air defenses, together with our allies, with the British, the Americans, the French, with Jordanian participation. And I'm reading reports about Saudi and other countries that may or may not have had influence in sharing intelligence ahead of time. If that appears to be true, then that's another good sign of countries weighing in on the situation. And all in all, a first stage of this encounter, I think, positive. Now what really looms ahead is how will Israel retaliate, and how will Israel carry a message to the Iranians that they have definitely crossed one bridge too far, and that this type of activity is not to be tolerated by Israel in the future.
Well, on that, Jonathan, what are the options available to Israel in terms of a response to Iran?
Well, Israel has a wide and quite diverse and deep toolbox when it comes to military capabilities and when it comes to dealing with Iran. Iran has significant defenses as well, nothing to be played around with. But at the end of the day, I think Israel has quite a lot of tools at its disposal, which could be very hurtful for Iran. The bigger question in my mind is, what will the Israeli strategic aim be? Because retaliating for the sake of retaliating wouldn't be a very smart thing to do, but retaliating as part of a bigger strategy to, for instance, fold back Iranian malign influence in the Middle East, or to deliver a significant blow to Iranian nuclear capabilities, these would be strategies that Israel would, of course, think about and consider. And it would be very important for Israel to do whatever it chooses to do, and however it does so. I think it would be very important for Israel to do it in coordination with and with the support and approval of its allies, most importantly the US, but also other European countries who stood up and helped defend Israel against the first Iranian attack.
The US are indicating that they won't be part of a response themselves, but will that put off Israel from, say, an aerial strike on a nuclear facility in Iran?
Frankly, I don't think that it will. And I've been listening very carefully to statements made by White House officials, by Speaker Kirby, and others, and I don't hear a clear no, don't do it. What I hear from the Americans is, we don't want to be dragged into a war, and we don't want to be actively a part of it, which is, it's not great, but it's not very bad. And what Israel needs is support, diplomatic cover, and of course, military supplies, etc. But Israel has the tools and the intelligence and the capabilities to perform such activities that you mentioned and beyond that. So at the end of the day, what really I think is happening as we're speaking, deliberations between Jerusalem and Washington, and perhaps London and Paris as well, preparing for an Israeli response against Iran, a response that will come. And Minister Gantz, I said it well, we will choose the location and time of our response, and it will be a very significant one. But what really is important here, and I think that the Israeli government has to implement lessons from the war against Hamas, how that campaign has been managed, and present our American allies with a plan, a comprehensive plan on what we are planning to achieve, and get their sign off or approval, and then go ahead and do it. I don't think that Israel is trying to escalate the situation into a global or a Middle Eastern war, but Israel doesn't have a choice but to retaliate against this type of brazen and unprecedented attack against its sovereign territory by another sovereign nation, Iran.
And so you would expect a direct attack on Iranian soil that could include some kind of strike on a nuclear program?
At this stage, I think that nothing's off the table, and Israel is considering various targets. Nuclear-related targets are definitely high up on the list of priorities, as are economic targets that facilitate Iran's funding of their numerous proxy organizations around the Middle East, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, to name a few, and the Houthis, to name a few. These are organizations that are firing directly at Israeli civilians and waging war against Israel. Of course, Israel has a direct interest and full legitimacy to undermine Iran's capacity to continue to provide money and weapons to these organizations. So these are two perhaps different families of targets. One would be the nuclear ones, whether it's reactors or centrifuges or heavy water or research and development facilities, or all of the above, or other economic or military infrastructure that Iran has, and it is part of the system that produces terror and instability in the Middle East.
And if you were going to say one way or another in terms of what's most likely, how do you think Israel will respond? And by that, I mean, will it be from the air, or will it be from submarines, or will it be something else?
Well, Israel has a formidable air force, which displayed its defense capabilities just 2 days ago. It also has very well-practiced and high-level skills in delivering ordnance to faraway targets. Israel would be able to use its air force to do that, including, of course, fifth-generation stealth bombers, as well as other combat aircraft. Israel has naval capabilities with far-reaching missiles, and Israel also has, less spoken about, but also has long-range missile capabilities, the Jericho family of missiles, which can strike every target in Iran with quite significant force. So there's quite a lot of tools in Israel's arsenal. And again, we circle back to what the strategic aim will be. What will Israel try to achieve? And then I think that once that is answered internally in Israel, then the action on the ground will be tailored in order to meet that request.
And should Israel respond in the way that you've described, how concerned are you then by the response to that response? What will Tehran do next? And will Israel's defenses stand up to it in the same way they did overnight on Saturday?
Well, I think that repeating a tremendous achievement of 99% interception rate is a very, very difficult feat. I don't think that we should become accustomed to that and anticipate 99% interception rate in the future. I don't think that we will be able to do that, but I think that it's a good display of capabilities. And we know, of course, that the Iranians have additional weapons and that they have a lot of additional weapons, some of them more sophisticated than what they fired at Israel, and some of them less sophisticated. So we should assume that when Israel retaliates against this Iranian aggression, the Iranians will respond in some way. They may do it directly by firing long-range missiles from Iran or other ways, and they may tell their proxies, like Hezbollah, to unleash much more substantial firepower from Lebanon, which of course is closer to Israel and would have a significant impact on Israeli society and on Israeli civilians. These things are, of course, calculated. They're part of the bigger picture in Israeli minds, and I think that Israeli leaders take this into consideration. But again, square one is that there will have to be a response. Now we'll see what type of response, how hard and how diverse it will be, how many targets in Iran will be struck. Just as a matter of comparison, Iran fired missiles at Jerusalem and they fired them towards Dimona. There's a certain facility of interest in Dimona. By way of parity, I think Israel would be quite justified firing at Tehran and firing at various nuclear facilities in Iran, since they did the same thing. So that's definitely an option.
How do you think this all ends? Can Israel cope with a war on so many potential fronts?
Well, I don't know how it ends, but what I know is that for many years, I would say for a decade and a half, even 2 decades, the Israeli strategy against Iran, against its force buildup, both of nuclear capabilities and against its regional attempts to build, fund, and arm terror organizations around our borders, has not been very successful. Iran is advancing rapidly towards military nuclear capabilities, and Iran has many proxies, armed and dangerous, close to Israel's borders. If Israel wants to change that reality for the sake of its civilians, then it must itself change its actions. If that means taking kinetic action against Iran, then so be it. I think after October the 7th, for Israelis to be subjected to that kind of wanton terror and violence in their homes, and for Israeli civilians to be abducted in their pajamas from their homes to underground dungeons in Gaza, that isn't a reality that Israel can continue to live with. That is why Israel is now dismantling Hamas. Hezbollah is next in line or next in order to be dealt with. But Israel really needs to change its strategy when it comes to Iran. And in this case, after April the 14th, there's an opportunity to hold Iran proper accountable for its actions, for its violence against Israel, for its blatant attack against Israel, and for puppeteering these terror organizations around our borders for so many years.